The galaxy was never truly silent. Even in the deepest void, there was the whisper of radiation, the faint hum of drifting debris, the distant sigh of a dying star. Yet we, the Ascended, called it silence, because all those sounds belonged to a cosmos we believed we had tamed. For eons, the great civilizations had held dominion, my people among them, lords of fleets, builders of worlds, sculptors of time itself. We gazed upon younger races as one might regard children playing with fire, fragile, reckless, destined to burn out long before they could threaten the order we had woven. But then came the humans. I remember the first time I saw one. Flesh-bound, short-lived, with no radiance of bioplasma or genetic refinement. A crude creature of bone and blood, its life flickering like a candle compared to our sun's. We judged them as weak. We wanted them to be weak. The balance of power required it. And yet there was something in their eyes. A defiance, a refusal to bow to inevitability. They smiled when they should have cowered. They joked where silence was demanded. They made war songs out of tragedy and laughter out of pain. We, the eternal, did not understand. Centuries of stillness stretched on. The ascended races held the stars in fragile unity. Petty conflicts flared and died as they always had. But none of us foresaw the storm approaching. The first strike did not come from humans. No. It came from the others. The Devourers. They were not like us. Not even like the humans. They were hunger incarnate, their fleets a tide of living metal, their worlds reduced to ash and biomass. Where they moved, suns grew cold, and civilizations crumbled into dust. We thought ourselves prepared. We had warred against countless threats before. We had learned patience, caution, and strategy from ages beyond human reckoning. Against the Devourers, we believed these lessons would suffice. We were wrong. Worlds burned. Fleets shattered. Ancient powers, older than humanity's first fire, collapsed in screams. I watched as allies begged for mercy and found none. Even my people, proud and unyielding, began to falter. For every fleet we destroyed, the Devourers spawned 2 more. For every fortress we razed, they tore down 10, and through it all the humans waited. At first, we thought them paralyzed. Their fleets did not surge to meet the invaders as ours did. Their leaders did not rush to the councils demanding unity and war. They lingered in silence, shadows in the galactic periphery. Some accused them of cowardice, others of selfishness. Surely such a fragile race would crumble before the storm. Surely they would beg us for protection, yet none of their worlds cried out. None of their fleets retreated. They were watching, calculating, sharpening their claws in the darkness while we, the mighty, bled. There was something unnerving in their stillness. Humanity was a storm contained, their eyes bright with a strange, unsettling patience. They had always been reckless, unpredictable, and yet now they moved with purpose. We, the ancients, laughed at it, dismissing it as desperation. Let them cling to their illusions, my kin told me. They are small. They will break when the Devourers come for them. But when the Devourers turned toward Earth, humanity did not break. The reports that filtered back to the ascended councils spoke of impossible resistance, of fleets that fought beyond endurance, of soldiers who did not retreat even when surrounded, of weapons built not for defense but for vengeance. We dismissed them as rumors, exaggerations meant to mask weakness. After all, no young race had ever withstood the Devourers. And yet, whispers began to spread. Whispers that the humans had drawn blood, that their fleets, though small, struck like daggers into the heart of the swarm, that their soldiers, though fragile, fought with a fury no shield could repel, that when the Devourers unleashed terror, the humans laughed and said, "Is that all?" It was then, as I watched the galaxy tremble, that the truth began to dawn on me. We had believed ourselves masters of war. We had believed our strategies eternal, our patience infinite, our arrogance justified. But we had never seen war as the humans had. To them it was not an art, it was not even survival. It was a companion, a shadow carried through every age of their existence. The humans were born of storms. They had torn themselves apart again and again on their fragile world. They had walked through fire, drowned in oceans, starved in deserts, bled in endless wars, and each time they had risen stronger. Where we sought to preserve ourselves, they sought to test themselves. Where we avoided pain, they embraced it, molded it, forged it into something indestructible. We had mistaken fragility for weakness. We had mistaken patience for fear, and now, as the first fires of galactic war spread like wildfire, I realized with a cold certainty, the silence before the storm had ended. The humans were sharpening their blades, and the Devourers were about to learn what kind of monsters Earth had birthed. The collapse began not with a great battle, but with a scream. I can still hear it. Broadband distress signals tearing through every comm channel, dozens of worlds calling for aid. Their voices overlapping, desperate, pleading. One by one, those signals cut to silence. We told ourselves it was interference. We told ourselves the relays had been destroyed. But deep down, each of us knew silence meant death. The Devourers moved like a tide, relentless and merciless. Their fleets did not glide with grace or discipline as ours did. They swarmed. Clouds of living metal, ships fused into grotesque hives, each one a city of teeth and claws. Against them, the proud fleets of the ascended races scattered like dust. I commanded a vessel then, an apex war cruiser armed with weapons forged across millennia. I believed, as all my kind did, that our power was enough, that the Devourers would crash upon us like waves against stone. But in the first engagement, I watched my fleet, my brothers, reduced to ash. Their screams echoed through neural link channels as hulls collapsed, as reactors bled fire, as minds were severed mid-thought. The coalition was a dream already dying. Each race fought for itself, screaming for reinforcements that would never arrive. We had spent centuries cultivating arrogance instead of unity, and now, when unity was needed most, we crumbled. Entire systems fell in a single sweep. Civilizations that had endured for tens of thousands of years burned in days. Our maps became graveyards of stars, and yet, amid this chaos, a whisper began to circulate. At first, I dismissed it as false hope, the kind of rumor soldiers cling to when despair threatens to crush them. Reports spoke of humans, yes, the fragile newcomers, launching counterstrikes. Not retreats, not desperate defense lines, but attacks. Impossible. No young race could withstand the Devourers. No fledgling fleet could strike them without being swallowed whole. And yet, sector after sector, fragments of evidence surfaced. Destroyed hive ships, scorched ruins of Devourer armadas, and survivors speaking in hushed tones of human vessels appearing like ghosts. I refused to believe it. Until I saw them myself, we had been routed. My cruiser limped through the wreckage of my people's homeworld, engines bleeding plasma, weapons silent. The Devourers were closing in, their living constructs surrounding us in a slow, tightening noose. I prepared to activate the core detonation, a final act of defiance, to deny them our knowledge. My crew whispered final prayers, then, out of the void, they came. Human ships, smaller than ours, yes, sleek and brutal in their design. No ornamental flourishes, no radiant energy sails. Their hulls were blackened with armor, their movements sharp and deliberate. They did not drift like prey. They lunged. The first salvo struck with terrifying precision. Kinetic slugs, hurled at near-relativistic speeds, tore through Devourer flesh metal as though it were paper. Missiles streaked out, splitting and resplitting into clouds of fire, overwhelming organic countermeasures. Where we hesitated, they advanced. Where we retreated, they surged forward, and their comms, they were not the cold, disciplined commands of ascended admirals. No, there was laughter. Laughter carried across open channels. Battle cries, coarse jokes, voices shouting in raw defiance. These were not warriors following ritual or doctrine. They were predators unleashed. I remember one transmission, burned into my memory. Target the big bastard. Let's see if it can bleed. And bleed it did. The hive ship looming over us shuddered as human weapons ripped through its spine. Flames, real flames, in the void, erupted from wounds we had never imagined could be inflicted. The Devourers faltered for the first time against prey that refused to act like prey. My crew stared in silence. We who had considered ourselves eternal watched humans, those fragile creatures, drag the fight back into the fire. It was not their numbers. Their fleets were small, almost laughably so compared to the swarms they faced. It was not their technology, though brutal and effective. It was nothing we could not replicate. No, what unsettled me, what froze my hearts in awe and terror, was their refusal to run. They advanced into death as if it were a dance they had long rehearsed. Where the coalition scattered, humanity concentrated. Where we begged for aid, they hunted. Their ships fought until nothing remained, either themselves or the enemy. No retreat, no surrender. I watched as their vessels carved corridors through the swarm, snatching survivors where they could, annihilating whatever stood in their path. They did not fight as though defending their lives. They fought as though declaring a truth. If we fall, you fall with us. It shook me. For centuries, we had viewed humanity as an infant race, barely worthy of our notice. And yet, in the crucible of fire, they revealed something none of us had: the will to drag their enemy down into the abyss, no matter the cost. The whispers spread faster now. Across dying fleets and burning worlds, alien survivors spoke of them with awe and disbelief. "The humans do not run," they said. "They advance." I saw it myself, again and again. Outnumbered, outgunned, their vessels slipping through. Wreckage fields like wolves through brush, striking, tearing, vanishing, and always the same grim determination. Not survival, not even victory, but defiance so absolute it became a weapon. The Devourers felt it too. Their movements grew, cautious. For the first time, the swarm hesitated when human signatures appeared on their sensors. They had expected prey. Instead, they found predators willing to bleed for every inch, and in that hesitation, a possibility stirred in the ashes of the coalition. If humans could draw blood, perhaps the Devourers were not gods. Perhaps they could be broken. The thought terrified me more than the Devourers themselves, because if it was true, if humanity truly possessed such madness, such fury, such refusal to die, then the balance of the galaxy was already broken. The Ascended were fading, the Devourers consuming, and in the space between, humanity was rising, forged in the fire of extinction, smiling at death as if it were an old companion. I am no fool. I know what I witnessed. The Devourers had unleashed terror upon the stars, but humanity had drawn first blood. I had seen 1,000 worlds in my lifetime. Cities spun around suns, planets carved into crystal metropolises, fleets so vast they eclipsed the stars. Yet nothing prepared me for Earth. We expected chaos. Humanity was, after all, a fractured species. Their history was littered with wars among themselves, endless squabbles over land, faith, and power. We thought their arrival in the EU Galactic stage would mirror this disunity, loud, messy, short-lived. And so, when the Devourers turned their gaze upon the Sol system, many of us believed the humans would break apart, retreating into their old divisions, too fractured to resist. We were wrong. From orbit above their pale blue world, I saw what none of us believed possible: a species united. Not a council of equals like ours, not a reluctant coalition of wary powers, but one people bound by a singular purpose. Humanity had abandoned its divisions. No arguments, no delays, no hesitation. Their response to annihilation was mobilization. Factories roared day and night, entire continents transformed into furnaces of war. I watched mountains gutted, rivers redirected, oceans stirred as vast shipyards rose from the waves. Orbital rings blazed with construction fire, each spark birthing starships. Cargo haulers carried endless streams of metal, munitions, and fuel into low orbit, where skeletal fleets grew day by day into something monstrous. We called it madness. They called it survival, but I could feel it in my bones. This was more than survival. The Devourers were a threat, yes, but what humanity was building went beyond desperation. They were not content to defend. They were preparing to break their enemy. I saw it in the faces broadcast across their networks. Not fear, not despair, but determination so sharp it cut through the void itself. Children carried supplies to the factories. Elders gave speeches of defiance, vowing to see the stars burn before surrendering. Soldiers drilled until their bodies broke, then rose again to drill harder. Their leaders did not bicker or stall. Orders flowed like a torrent, and they obeyed as though driven by a single mind. Their unity was not born of peace, it was born of rage, and as I watched, terror crept into my hearts, because I realized what the others had not. Humanity was not preparing for annihilation. Humanity was preparing for victory. I spoke with one of their admirals, an old man scarred from countless battles on his homeworld. His eyes burned with something I could not name, and when I asked him why they fought, he laughed. Why? Because if someone comes to burn your house down, you don't just put out the fire, you hunt the bastard down and make damn sure he never comes back. It was a primitive sentiment, but it chilled me more than any philosophy my people had ever uttered, because it was not rhetoric. It was truth. The humans would not stop at survival. They would not settle for endurance. They would fight until their enemy was utterly broken. I had never seen such scale of mobilization. Entire oceans became launch platforms. Their great cities, once symbols of culture, transformed into fortresses. Highways turned into supply lines, skyscrapers into barracks. Their skies darkened beneath the rising fleets. I remember one night, if it could be called night, for the planet's surface blazed with industry, when I looked down upon Earth and realized I could no longer see the stars. Smoke and fire consumed the heavens. Humanity had turned its entire world into a weapon. And the terrifying part? They did it with joy. Workers sang as they toiled. Soldiers cheered as they marched. Families wept, yes, but their tears were not of despair. They were of fury, fury that someone dared threaten their existence, fury that someone thought they could break them. We called it madness. But in my heart I knew it was something else. It was resolve, resolve unlike anything in the galaxy. The Ascended had always seen war as tragedy, a necessary evil, a last resort. Humanity saw it as something different, a crucible, a chance to prove themselves, to rise, to grow sharper. Where we feared loss, they embraced it. Where we sought to preserve, they sought to overcome. And I began to question everything I thought I knew. Had we misunderstood them all along? We had seen their fragility and mistaken it for weakness. We had seen their chaos and mistaken it for disunity. But perhaps it was those very traits that made them unstoppable. Fragile bodies forced them to adapt. Chaos forced them to unite when it truly mattered. Short lives made them reckless, unafraid of risk. Every weakness was not a flaw, but a weapon. And now those weapons were turned toward a single goal, the extinction of the Devourers. I watched the fleets rise from Earth's oceans, massive carriers surfacing like leviathans, sleek destroyers, cutting through waves before leaping skyward on columns of fire. Drones swarmed in clouds, forming vast patterns across the stratosphere. Satellites turned into defense grids. Orbital cannons aligned, glowing with fury. One by one, the pieces fell into place, and humanity's war machine came alive. The galaxy whispered of their madness. Some mocked them still, believing it unsustainable. Others feared them, warning that such unity was unnatural. But I knew the truth. This was not madness. This was humanity. And when the Devourers came, they would face not a fractured world of prey, but a united predator, teeth bared, claws sharpened, eyes fixed upon victory. I trembled as I realized what that meant for all of us. Because if humanity could unite under war, what else could they unite under? What if, when the Devourers fell, they turned their eyes upon the rest of the galaxy? What if the storm they forged did not end but continued to spread, consuming all who stood in their way? For the first time, I prayed, not for my people, not for the ascended, not even for survival. I prayed humanity never saw us as enemies. We thought we had already seen the worst. We thought the burning of worlds, the collapse of empires, the screams of billions devoured in silence were the edge of horror. But the Devourers had not yet revealed their true hunger. They called it, at least in the fractured translations we managed to intercept, the Stellar Harvester. I wish I could call that name exaggeration. I wish I could say it was just another weapon, another superstructure built to intimidate. But I saw it. I felt it. And there are no words to capture the terror of watching a star itself begin to die. The Harvester arrived in the Calaris system, where my people had taken refuge. It was larger than moons, a fortress of living alloy and writhing flesh, tendrils stretching thousands of kilometers. It latched onto the star as though it were prey. And then, the light began to dim. The star screamed. That is the only way I can describe it. Its plasma surged and writhed, siphoned into the Harvester's maw. Planets shuddered. Atmospheres ignited. Tides collapsed. Entire civilizations watching their sun fade before their eyes, unleashed final transmissions, screams, prayers, curses, silence. The Harvester fed until the system was nothing but cinders. Then it moved on. We begged for help. We pleaded with the other ascended. We even reached out to the humans. Surely now even they would break. Surely even their defiance had limits. But the humans did not beg. They answered, and what they unleashed. Even now, I struggle to believe it was real. They called it Project Fenrir. The name meant nothing to us at first. To them, it was legend, a beast chained in myth, destined to devour gods at the end of days. I understand now why they chose it. For years, decades perhaps, they had hidden it from us. Not even their supposed allies in the coalition knew. We thought their strength lay only in the fleets we could see, the factories we could measure. But in the dark, behind smoke and silence, they had been forging something else. Something far worse. Entire human fleets vanished from their staging grounds. No signals, no transmissions. Their systems went dark as though swallowed by the void. Panic spread among us. We thought they had abandoned the war, fled into hiding. But then the first reports came in. Deep within Devourer-held space, far beyond any defensive perimeter, their worlds began to burn. We could not understand how. The distances were too vast, the defenses too thick. No fleet could penetrate so deeply, but the evidence was undeniable. Hive worlds that had consumed a dozen civilizations were torn apart in hours. Breeding factories went silent. Command nodes erupted into fire. When the transmissions finally reached us, I felt my blood run cold. Human fleets reappeared, not at the edges, but at the heart. They struck with precision, with brutality. They did not linger. They tore out the veins of the Devourer Empire and vanished again into the dark, leaving only wreckage behind. Predators. That was what they had become. Where we fought with desperation, the humans fought with calculation. Where we begged for mercy, they gave none. I heard whispers among my kind that humanity had discovered new forms of travel, weapons designed not for defense, but for revenge. Weapons that bent the very laws we thought immutable. Project Fenrir was not a shield. It was a chain-breaking, God-killing doctrine. The Devourers, who had never known fear, began to hesitate. Their swarms faltered, their movements became erratic. It was as though they had finally encountered prey that bit back, not just to survive, but to hunt. And the galaxy. The galaxy watched in awe and terror. Because we realized that humans had crossed a threshold none of us dared approach. We had always fought to preserve ourselves, to endure, to delay the inevitable. But humanity? Humanity fought to erase their enemy from existence. Every battle they won, they pushed deeper. Every loss they suffered, they repaid tenfold. Their fleets were not vast, not compared to ours, but they fought with a ferocity that multiplied their strength. They learned faster than the Devourers could adapt. and they carried no illusions of peace, no hesitation in cruelty. One captured human transmission spread across the galaxy, burned into every mind that heard it. They want hell? Fine, let's show them what hell really means. We had called them fragile. We had called them reckless. But in the fire of annihilation, humanity had become something else, something relentless, something inevitable. Predators who smiled in the dark and whispered promises of vengeance. I cannot describe the fear I felt then. Not of the Devourers, they had always been monsters, but of the humans. Because I realized the Devourers had unleashed more than destruction. They had awakened something buried deep within humanity's soul, something older than their stars. A hunger, not for survival, not for peace, for victory. And the galaxy trembled as it watched. I once thought there were limits to war, that every species, no matter how brutal, reached a threshold where survival was no longer worth the cost. Even the Devourers had boundaries, though few, instinctive pauses in their hunger, cycles in their devastation. But then the humans showed me what it meant to be limitless. The Harvester burned systems to ash. Whole coalitions dissolved. Empires folded under terror. My people begged, bartered, wept. But humanity only changed. The first time I saw it with my own eyes, I thought I was witnessing madness. On the shattered colony of Vera, the Devourers descended like a storm of knives. The planet's surface became a blackened grave, its defenses torn apart. Any other species would have fled. My kind would have retreated to lick wounds, preserve what little remained, but not the humans. From orbit, I watched them land again. Soldiers in steel exosuits descended into ruins still burning, factories still smoldering. They did not mourn. They built. In the heart of devastation, they hammered new forges, repurposed rubble into fortresses, dragged broken ships into new fleets. It was not defiance. It was not courage. It was ritual. Every blow the Devourers dealt only gave humanity another reason to strike back harder, and the galaxy whispered the unthinkable. They had been training for this. We had mocked their history, millennia of endless war upon themselves. Nations rising and falling, continents bathed in blood, entire generations slaughtered by their own kin. We thought it proof of their savagery, their weakness. But we were blind. We did not see it for what it truly was. Preparation. The Devourers brought apocalypse. Humanity only shrugged and said, "We've seen worse." When their fleets were shattered, they rebuilt stronger. I saw vessels forged from hybrid wreckage, ships stitched from 3 different battlefields into something new, something unpredictable. Weapons that should never have worked together fired in unison. Engines that belonged to dead civilizations roared under human banners. When their armies fell, their replacements were already in motion. Entire populations mobilized not in decades, but in days. Men, women, children, no one exempt, no one unwilling. Their orbital rings blazed like hives, swarms of fresh war machines pouring forth faster than the Devourers could consume them. It was insanity. It was impossible. And yet it was real. We Ascended had always assumed survival meant preservation, minimizing losses, clutching to what remained. Humans rejected that logic. For them, survival meant escalation. No sacrifice was too great. No weapon too abhorrent, no doctrine too cruel. And when the Devourers dared unleash hell upon them, the humans only smiled. I heard the recording. Every race did. It spread like wildfire through the ruins of our galaxy, a human commander's voice, calm as the void. Finally. A reason to get really nasty. It chilled me more than the Harvester ever could, because the humans did not merely respond. They began to fight with doctrines older than stars, strategies born from their endless cycles of self-destruction, methods banned by every sane race, firestorms that consumed entire atmospheres to choke enemies, viral payloads that rewrote biology mid-battle, oceans boiled into traps, tectonics weaponized to swallow entire hives. The Devourers were not ready. How could they be? They had only ever hunted prey. They had never fought predators who fought uglier than themselves. In one infamous campaign, the humans lured an entire devourer swarm into the orbit of a gas giant. Then they ignited it. A world-sized inferno engulfed the swarm, burning for days in a storm of plasma. Billions of Devourers were reduced to ash. On another front, humans seeded their own colonies with self-replicating minds. When the Devourers descended, the minds awakened, tearing apart the invaders in swarms of machine locusts. Entire fleets vanished into those metal storms. This was not survival. This was something deeper. A primal doctrine etched into their species. If you strike us, we will strike back twice as hard. If you try to break us, we will show you what breaking truly means. I began to understand then, though I wished I hadn't. Humans had never been the weakest. They had only been underestimated. Fragile bodies, yes. Short lives, yes. But their history had forged them in ways we could not comprehend. Extinction was not a nightmare to them. It was an old companion, a ghost that had followed them for millennia. Climate collapse, plagues, wars with weapons that could scorch continents. They had stared into their own abyss countless times, and each time they crawled back stronger. The Devourers thought to bring them despair. Instead, they gave them clarity, unity. For the first time in their fractured history, humanity stood as one world, one species, one will. And with that unity came fury. I watched transmissions from Earth, every continent ablaze with factories, seas bristling with starships rising like leviathans, orbital forges spitting fire into the heavens. Children singing war hymns as they welded steel. Entire generations raised not to fear the void, but to conquer it. It was beautiful. It was horrifying. And for the first time, the Devourers hesitated. The galaxy began to whisper another truth. One none of us dared say aloud, but all of us felt the Devourers were doomed, not because humanity was stronger, not because they were smarter, but because they were meaner. Every trick, every cruelty, every weapon the Devourers unleashed, humans matched it, then surpassed it. They adapted faster, struck harder, endured longer. They were a species not content to survive apocalypse, but to thrive within it. Predators of predators. I realized with a horror I can never unsee that the Devourers had made a mistake greater than any weapon they had built. They had given humanity something precious, not hope, not peace, a reason to unleash everything they had ever learned from tearing themselves apart, a reason to pour the full weight of their rage into a single war, a reason to get nasty. And the galaxy? The galaxy finally understood. We had thought ourselves the ancients, the masters of war, but we were children playing at survival. Humanity showed us what it meant to fight without mercy, without limit, without end. I do not know if they will win. None of us do. But I know this. If humanity falls, they will drag the Devourers into the abyss with them. And if they win, then the Devourers will not be the last to fear them. Because once you have seen humans unleashed, you can never forget. The Devourers did not die quietly. They shrieked across the void, their swarms scattering into the fractures of collapsing empires. Their harvester burned until its final breath, pulling whole stars into death throes. Planets crumbled beneath their retreating claws. Even in defeat, they sought to devour, to drag us all with them into nothingness. But humanity would not allow it. I stood on the bridge of my flagship, watching the impossible unfold. Human fleets, patched together from wreckage, half machine, half miracle, drove straight into the Devourer heartworlds. They did not encircle. They did not blockade. They plunged like knives into the blackest core of the swarm. We followed, because there was nothing else left to do. The galaxy, broken and starving, rallied behind the Terrans, not from loyalty, but from terror of being left behind. They led. We obeyed, and as their fleets bled and burned, they never slowed. Every loss became fuel. Every casualty became purpose. Where one ship fell, 3 more filled the gap. Where a soldier died, 10 rose in their place, bearing the same banner, the same unyielding oath. Refuse to die. That was their creed, spoken not as hope, but as commandment. The final battle did not end in triumph. It ended in ruin. Humanity did not outwit the Devourers. They did not corner them with clever traps or divine strategies. They crushed them beneath fire and fury, drowning them in oceans of sacrifice. Entire systems burned so that one human fleet could press deeper. Moons were shattered to fuel their war engines. Colonies willingly immolated themselves to drag enemy hives into their graves. I will never forget the sight. Earth's fleets locked in a burning spiral around the Harvester itself. Their ships breaking apart one by one, yet none retreating. They boarded it, fought within its living chambers, tore it apart with hands, blades, explosives, teeth if they had to, and in the end, it screamed. The Harvester, the monster that had devoured 1,000 suns, collapsed in a storm of its own rage. A star died with it, taking human and devourer alike into the abyss. But humanity endured, bloodied, broken, half extinguished, yet enduring. When silence returned, it was not victory I felt. It was dread. Across the galaxy, we looked upon the Terrans and realized the truth. They were scarred beyond measure. Entire continents gone, populations halved, generations condemned to rebuild from ash. But they stood, and in standing, they had proven what no other species ever dared believe. Strength does not belong to the most ancient or the most advanced, or the most cunning. Strength belongs to the ones who refuse to die. I watched them rebuild from ruin, and it filled me with awe and fear. Where my kind would have crumbled, they forged anew. Their factories roared louder than before. Their fleets expanded into voids once choked with devourer hives. Their children were raised not in peace, but in remembrance. Their lullabies turned to war hymns. The galaxy belonged to them now, not because they demanded it, not because they sought dominion, but because all of us, every ascended, every broken empire, knew in our hearts that no one could ever stand against them again. I find myself praying, though I no longer know to whom, praying that humanity will never turn its fury upon the rest of us, that their unity forged in rage will dissolve into something gentler, something less consuming, that their eyes, still burning from the war, will not someday look upon our worlds and whisper, "A reason," because I have seen what happens when humans are given a reason. The Devourers learned too late. We must not.